Thank you, Senator Saab, and thank you, IPRI. Thank you to all of you for staying back. I'm sure it wasn't because of me, but anyway. Um, and so all of you stayed back. I wish Dr. Moeed had also stayed back because I fundamentally disagree with him. And I fundamentally disagree with this mantra that has been created, especially since April 2022, that it's the economy stupid, right? So let me build the case, but before I do that, let me quickly sort of contextualize what I'm going to say. And I think we all know a lot of the things that I'm going to say initially, and a lot of some insights have already been presented. We all know that Pakistan is not in a good place. It's not been in a good place for a long time, right? So that raises certain questions of why we have not tackled the issues that have just kept on piling on, be it climate change or population or a health insecurity or our education emergency. We called it many years ago education emergency, and we still haven't addressed it the way we should have. On top of that, over a period of years, Pakistan finds itself, I use the term polycrisis, many of us have used that term, Dr. Maliha Lodi, etc. But now I think maybe even that polycrisis is not sufficient to really capture what Pakistan is experiencing. We've moved into what I would call a perma-crisis. We're in a state of perma-crisis. And I think the sooner we realize that, the better. And it's important to realize why we are in that situation before we can sort of talk about prescriptions. So we've moved from secular stagnation, and I don't use the word secular as a double entendre or a pun. It's a long-run stagnation. And then from there, unfortunately, we found ways to move to secular decline. And this is across not just the economy, and that's a really important point. It's across all the essential and existential dimensions of a polity, be it economic, but more importantly, it's social as well as governance related, right? So our institutional framework has frayed to the point where we are unable to support all the development agendas or items that we've put on the agenda. Now, why is that the case, right? So before I come to that, let me just give you a quick snapshot, and many of the things have already been mentioned. Since I sort of write about the economy or think about the economy or talk about the economy, we all know that Pakistan's economy is now, it has been actually for the last about 5 to 7 years, the sick man of South Asia, right? This is inconceivable because in the 90s, when I used to point out certain trends that were happening, or the early 2000s, to my friends in Islamabad, in the power centers, they used to say, aap to bahut hi negative hai. Bangladesh will never overtake Pakistan. India is maybe, at par with Pakistan, but certainly don't compare us with anything like, sub-Saharan Africa or whatever. That's too far-fetched. Well, that doesn't seem to be too far-fetched now, unfortunately. And if you talk about our human development indicators, we sit at 161 out of 191 countries on the Human Development Index. Faisal has already mentioned that we have the highest number of out-of-school children. So it's not just a number. We have the highest number of out-of-school children in the world. One of the highest rates of stunting of under 5 children in the world. We have one of the lowest participation rates of women in the labor force in the world. And Pakistan ranks in the 25th percentile for rule of law and in the 23rd percentile for control of corruption. Right? So these are not new things. These are things that have been happening for a long period of time, and we've just happily sort of ignored them. So it raises the question, why has it been left addressed for so long? And why has this situation persisted across all forms of government? Military interventions, hybrid governments, sort of quasi-civilian governments. It's persisted across the board. So clearly there are foundational issues at work that have not been resolved. And this whole situation is emblematic of very strong elite capture. Now, we've talked about this for the last 1 year, especially. We've, there's a consensus that there's a strong elite capture in Pakistan. What we really don't talk about is a corollary to that, which is at play in Pakistan, especially in Pakistan. I can't speak for other countries. I've looked at elite capture in Argentina, in Egypt. In some countries, there is the corollary at work, but I can't say for sure. I can say that for Pakistan. As a Pakistani citizen on the ground, I've seen this for a long period of time, and many of you have seen it. And now, since April 22, we've seen it in its most raw and naked form. And that is a toxic governance model. What are the elements of this toxic governance model? We want to extract geopolitical rents. That is the number one go-to policy for our policymakers to prop up the economy, their own economy primarily, but generally the economy. There's a co-option of status quo insiders. There's a weak institutional framework, obviously, because that is, that's just the sort of nature of the beast of elite capture. Elite capture will never tolerate a strong institutional framework that provides checks and balances. And unfortunately, another element of this is that we want to provincialize national parties. And this is really, so when you talk about threats to Pakistan, non-traditional threats, you have to talk about your own governance model and how this is such a major threat to Pakistan, right? So this is a classic agency problem. And what we know is that, ruling elites are comfortably numb. Status quo insiders will never have the incentive to change. So I'm really skeptical about the SIFC, the Charter of the Economy, the national security policy. You're talking about a pivot to geoeconomics, et cetera, because if these were things that were to happen, they would have happened, right? So we're still constructing things that are looking at the whole problem from the prism of the economy, whereas the problem really is that there is strong elite capture, and these people, those people who are running the show in Pakistan, the ruling elites, have no incentive to change. Even when the house is on fire and it's, the economy is collapsing, I don't want to talk about the other bits, but certainly they still don't have the incentive to change. And one of the reasons they don't have the incentive to change, I'm glad ex-ambassador Rafael is here, because what I'm going to say is probably concerns that part of the world. One of the reasons our elites do not have the incentive to change is because of the role of the international establishment. They create a moral hazard in Pakistan. Our ruling elites do not have to face the consequences of their action and inaction the way you and I or our children will have to face. They don't have to face the consequences of climate action because they'll go to countries or migrate to countries that will allow them to live better lives. So I think this is a huge problem as well. Now, so my bottom two last 2 points are that even constructs like geoeconomics and Charter of the Economy are red herrings at best or diversions at the worst. Very sinisterly crafted diversions to get us off the big elephant in the room, get our vision off the elephant in the room. And that elephant is that to be able to do all the things that we've spoken about, to be able to address both the traditional and the non-traditional security challenges and other challenges in Pakistan, to make lives of Pakistani citizens worth living, we have to embrace constitutional democracy. We have to embrace rule of law. We have to give voice and representation to each and every citizen in Pakistan, and that is how we will address these challenges. Thank you.
My question to Saqib Sherani Saab, you have talked about strong elite capture. So actually, status quo forces are too much strong that it is very difficult to dismantle this strong elite capture by using public power through democracy and other ways. So what is the way out to get rid of from this strong elite capture in Pakistan? What is the way out?
Thank you.
Well, thank you for that question. It's really important. But if you allow me, before that, let me just quickly comment on what you said. And it's so true. There was a few years ago, there was a psychologist from UK who works in Pakistan. He visits every year and works with communities here. He told me something. He said, like you cannot see the bad quality of air that you're breathing, not forget Lahore, even in Islamabad. The same way, you cannot see the psychosocial toxicity in the society. It's gone up to such high levels that it's actually really affecting mental health, across all age groups. Even children are being affected. So it is, obviously Zafar Saab would know better, but it is a crisis probably in the making, or probably a crisis that's already erupted. And we're not helping with, the narratives we're building or the things that we're doing at the national level. I think we need to diffuse the situation and take it to, start governing this country in a more normal manner, in a normal fashion, that will really bring down this issue. I wish I had an answer. I don't. Nobody does, because around the world, so just to give you a small anecdote, many years ago there was a conference here. There was a professor from Argentina, and I was chairing the session. We spoke about elite capture. He spoke about elite capture. And at the end of the session, I asked him, I said, how do we, the same question that you asked, how do we tackle this issue? And he laughed. He said, how old is your country? And I said, then it was 67 years. He said, we've been fighting it for 150 years. We haven't broken from it, So it's really difficult to break free from it. The only way it happens is when the elites have this inner realization that this is completely unsustainable. And they move to a model where, the Suharto model or whatever you want to call it, they start becoming, less extractive, and they let the pie grow and take a smaller share of it, but that share in absolute terms becomes larger and larger. But they somehow realize that this is unsustainable. So in their own interest, self-interest, and this is what I think Stephen Durkheim also talks about in Gambling for Development. He was here talking about an elite bargain. My only issue with that is an elite bargain should not become a bargain for the elites. Right? I mean, it's already a bargain for the elites, right? So we have to do some things differently, where the elites also don't get away scot-free. They pay the price, and they lose some of their privileges and their benefits or whatever to normalize the situation. But I don't have answer. Just quickly, there are two fantastic books. Dr. Faisal Bari's mentioned one of them, one of my favorite books, Why Nations Fail. The other one is by Jared Diamond, called Upheaval. It's a really easy to read book about 7 case studies of 7 countries that went through national crises and how they adapted to them and how they coped with them. And I think it's a book to read, because at the end he draws 7 takeaways of how countries can manage this. The top one is elitisation. They have to realize that we're in a crisis.